walk you through how I made my Vangeance cosplay from Black Clover. If you don't know, he's one of my top 5 characters from Black Clover. I watched it last year in 2024, which is also when I made the cosplay. It was kind of my big cosplay project of 2024 where I learned more about my sewing machine, 3D printing, and designing that. So in this video, I would love to walk you through my whole process. So without further ado, let's get into this. Hello, today I will be talking through how I made my Vangeance cosplay. So starting off with the tunic, this is just a normal white button-up. First, I cut off all of the buttons because I was going to be working on that whole front section. Then I took a gold fabric and the kind of royal blue fabric and kind of just laid it out to how I wanted it to look. Starting with the gold, I have my fabric that I will eventually cut in half so that I have 2 sections on each side of the tunic. So I folded it in half and then I just cut it down the side so that I had 2 parts. I wanted the gold fabric to be underneath the blue, so that's why I'm starting with the gold, and as you can see, I kind of tucked it on that right side of the shirt. On both sides, I tucked it in so that when I sew it, it'll be a nice straight line instead of jagged. And then here is me pinning it down. And then for the middle section of what's going to be showing on the tunic, I made sure it was about equal inches around the whole thing. And so it's about 6 inches across, and I kept that from top to bottom, which is what I'm showing here, again with the pins to the right side, which is where I would eventually sew it with my sewing machine. So as you can see now, this is what it looks like sewed on. Of course, that under flap doesn't really matter because that's not going to be showing it all, but I made sure on the outside that I had a nice straight line, and again, I did that with my sewing machine. So then I would go and do the exact same thing to the other side. So starting with pinning it down, and then once I had that pinned down, I could go ahead and sew it. And so here that looks with both sides completely sewn down. I didn't show the other side since I just talked through how to do one side, but it was the exact same process. As you can see, I used kind of that black fabric on one side because you're not going to really see that, and then I used gold on top to match the coloring of the gold. Next, I just quickly sewed the bottom here, as you can see, just so there wasn't a flap hanging off. Once I had my gold in place, I took my royal blue fabric and basically did the exact same process, first cutting it into 2 halves, one for each side of the tunic. And this part was just a little bit different because the blue that I was using was just a little bit shorter than the gold, since I wanted that gold to be more of a border for the blue. And so I want to say it was about 5-ish inches of the blue that I was using instead of 6 like I did for the gold. And so I just made sure that there was equal border of that gold all the way around. I pinned it, I sewed it, and this is how it turned out. So exactly the same process as the gold. After this, I glued on 8 different buttons that I had to match the other gold that is on his outfit. This part right here is where the belt would go, and so I didn't want there to be buttons under that, so I left a blank area for that. But those other buttons at the bottom, I made sure there was equal distance from each other apart so that they looked even. Next, this is me showing off these toggles that I used. So basically these are sewed into each side and they connect so that I don't have to have functional buttons. These just go under the flaps of the tunic so I can easily put that on and off. For the collar, I had some extra gold fabric that I basically just looped around the whole collar of the initial shirt, made sure that all of the flaps were down on the sides so that when I sew it, it's nice and even straight lines. So there are all of the pins that I put into that before sewing it with my machine. Same with the top section on both sides, that is pinned down as well. Now this is going to be for my sleeves, and so as you can see, I kind of just pinned off both sides like that, and then I sewed them. This is fit to my forearm area, and so when I made this, I measured that out to make sure it would fit me. And then what I did was I kind of pinned it here where my finger is, and it needed to be sewn inside out so that I can now, as I'm showing, flip that inside out, and that way all of the sew marks are nice and even and straight on the outside, and the messy part is kind of concealed within, since that's the part we're not going to see. And so I made 2 of those for my sleeves. Here is a video of me showing that off, which will eventually be sewn to the tunic. I just cut off the arm of part of that initial shirt, sewed on the sleeve, added the blue ruffles at the bottom. And again, I did this twice since there are 2 sleeves for both of my arms. Next, I will be talking about how I made the shoulder cape. So I took a big square section of this kind of tan fabric to make this shoulder cape. I folded it in half twice to make a smaller square. Then what I'm pointing to here is where eventually is going to be where my neck goes. So I'm going to measure out about 2 inches of kind of like a quarter circle and then cut that, and it'll make a hole for where my neck will go. So there's me going in. That was about a measurement of 2 inches that I just drew on with pencil. And then going up here, I believe this was closer to about 15 to 19 inches, basically depends how long you want your shoulder cape to be. And then I'm going in and trying to just kind of sketch out a big quarter circle on there with the pencil. Then I would go in and cut this so that it was made circle, kind of looking like a donut. So you'll see me here going through cutting that and then cutting this top section. I tried to make this as straight as possible, which was a little hard because there are 4 layers of that fabric on top, and so afterward you'll see I kind of trimmed up the edges a bit just to make it a little bit more circular and more even all the way around. So here we have our shoulder cape so far. So it kind of looks like a donut. That hole in the middle is where my neck will go, and then it will just go around my whole upper body. And so that was just me showing it off. Now I'm going to take a tape measure and draw a straight line from that neck hole down to one of the edges. After that, I am going to then cut with scissors down that line so that I have kind of an opening in that shoulder cape. After this was probably one of the hardest things I did for this cosplay, but I took pins and I, as easily and as nicely as I could, tried to just make a circle all the way around. I just folded around the fabric so that when I sewed this, it would be a nice straight edge instead of a super jagged edge. And so it also created kind of this thickness, which was really nice. And so then here is a video after the sewing. You can see that I used a black fabric on my sewing machine because I did want there to be that black line that stood out. If you look at the character, he does kind of have these black lines at the bottom, and so I purposely used a black fabric instead of tan to match the original fabric of the cape. So here I just wanted to show this was me going in and sewing on the blue ruffles to match the sleeves. So that was the bottom, and then this is the part that'll go around my neck on the outside. Next are these golden grommets that I basically just pounded in with my grommet tools. I did 2 on both sides so that I could easily put his kind of brooch pin through both of them. And so what I did is you just kind of make them overlap, and then the pin goes through, you put the backing on, and then the shoulder cape stays together, and we have our little brooch. I also sewed in that red rope in 2 spots, one on the shoulder and then one a little closer down to create the loop. And then here's a video of this kind of pocket I made to cover up the top of the rope, which is how the character's outfit is as well. So just a quickly sewn little rectangle of fabric to create a pocket, but I left that one side open. Here you can see what I was talking about with the rope. I sewed it in that place and then under that little pocket as well to keep it in place. That way I don't have to put on that rope every time I put on the cosplay. Lastly, one of my favorite things to work on for this cosplay was the character's mask. So this is a 3D printed mask that I found the format draft for online, bought that and then had this printed. So here, as you can see, there was just a little couple things of kind of these chunky parts of the 3D print that didn't print too smoothly, so I went in with sandpaper and sanded that out. Then I coated the whole thing with a layer of gesso. Basically, this just primed everything so then I could put paint on it instead of just on the 3D plastic itself. So here are the 3 colors I chose, the kind of tan, red, blue, and then I also went in with some white at the end for the details. So as you can see, this was the tiny little brush I used for the detail work. And here we have the painted mask. I did about 3 layers of paint, and then lastly I finished it up with a coat of Mod Podge, basically to seal everything in and to give it that shiny look, which you can see very well on the reflection from the light. And so that is the mask without all of the added details, which I will talk about now. So this character has kind of these red and white puffballs and then 2 feathers on the back of his mask. He has about 4 puffballs, but the proportion of a human and an anime character's faces are very different, and so I ended up adding a lot more puffballs than he does. But as you can see, I just used this super glue. I purposely put it on the strap of the puffball because then I noticed that it would hold better. And then after putting on a very generous amount of glue on there, then stuck it to the mask itself. And then I basically just repeated this for all of the puffballs on the mask. I made sure to hold them down so that they wouldn't fall off, and this glue ended up working pretty well. That is going to wrap up this walkthrough video. I also wanted to include one thing that I did not talk about much, which is this patch. So of course, this is the patch that all of the Golden Dawn members have. Vangeance, you know, all of them. And so I actually found this on Etsy. I'm gonna leave the shop name on my screen, but I also wanted to just give a huge shout out to them. They are a huge Black Clover fan. We had a conversation about Black Clover and how I was making this Vangeance cosplay, and so I just wanted to say totally go and support them. They make these awesome patches which really just put together my whole cosplay. So with that being said, I'm going to share a last couple of pictures of me in my cosplay as Vangeance, and let me know if you have any questions about the process of making this cosplay in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Bye!